Geht's, yeah? Hello, good evening everybody, good afternoon. Thanks for coming here in the basement. It's a very difficult location to find. I'm really happy you found it, that's fantastic. So this is a new initiative, as you know, Media Art and the Art Market. There was a symposium yesterday already, and I give you a brief update what we discussed yesterday. Some of our speakers have been here yesterday as well. Galerie Anita Beckers was there yesterday at the discussion. Galerie Fletcher from London was there yesterday, and myself. And this initiative came out of a symposium that we organized last year at the Lentos Museum. I'm not sure if you know the Lentos Museum. It's our art museum here in Linz, directly at the river, very near of the Art University. And we had this symposium called Media Art and the Art Market on October 10th last year. And I just show you here briefly who the speakers have been. This was basically the head of our school, Stella Rollig, the back then director of the Lentos Museum. Then also Gerfried Stocker, of course, myself, as well as Steve Fletcher, who was here last year already, Christiane Paul from the Museum of American Art in New York, Whitney Museum, as well as Annette Doms from an unpaid art fair in Munich, and Paul Welder, art critic from Mallorca, as well as Wolf Lieser, who runs the Damm Gallery in Berlin. And since this symposium last year was very successful, and we found there's a real big need for media artists, but also collectors and museums to deal about media art and the connection to the art market, and I see many artists here as well, media artists. I think there is now a very good momentum to bring this topic to Ars Electronica. And we are very happy that Gerfried Stocker took on this topic and said, yes, we want to feature this at Ars Electronica, and this is the first test run here, and we hope to extend it in the future. I would like to thank also Martin Honzig, who has been really very supportive of bringing art galleries here to Ars Electronica. I think it's one of the first time, or maybe the first time, that galleries present themselves here at Ars Electronica, and I think there is a really big need to extend this, as we said. And I see Ashley, who was here yesterday. So yesterday's symposium was also chaired by Alessio Chierico, who is a student, PhD student in our program at the University of Art and Design in Linz, in my master program called Interface Cultures. And we are planning now to make a new initiative that is dealing with this topic in an academic but also practical way. So let me give you a short overview of what we discussed yesterday. Steve Fletcher, I hope I'm summarizing it correctly, showed us a new model that promotes artists for 3 years and helps them to develop their career. And he stressed out the importance of artists in media art, not only display their works, but also show descriptive materials and also interpretations of the work. That's a sort of short summary. Minaru Hatanaka from NTT ICC Museum, who maybe is around here, also showed us the ICC collection, which comprises 14 interactive and online media artworks. He also showed us that many of these works are not running anymore, so he was quite honest about the difficulties. And he also stressed the importance of that we should have artist interviews, videos, descriptive texts, photos, etc., in order to make these works more durable or have secondary material, as he called them. Then Anita Beckers, who is here with us from Anita Beckers Gallery, Frankfurt, said, and I found this very interesting, Anita, that artists or also collectors buy these works only when it touches their heart, you mentioned. So maybe we can go back to this, and that you observed this already for a very long time, that the issue of conservation and formatting and transporting from one format to another format has been around for a long time already. So, and you have been 35 years. And that you also call for a kind of orchestrated effort that we need, you mentioned. Maybe we can go back to this. Then Orem Moshe from Neosystem, who is also around, showed us some new collection management systems, a kind of Dropbox system for the art market, as he called it. That was very interesting. And Elizabeth Markiewicz from Econo TV showed us how we can distribute classical media or classical artworks in a cinematic way. So kind of goes under the category of new format. So this is a short update what has happened yesterday, but today we want to continue discussion or have a small, slightly different focus and address the problems, but also wish lists of how we would this topic to be addressed within the media art community. So let me introduce or ask everybody to introduce themselves briefly. Maybe we start with Steve and also address their opinion or a very short summary of how they have been involved with media art. I know this sound is very disturbing. I've asked already before, but maybe we can ask one more time because I also don't hear much. Do you understand us? This is way too loud, yes, I know. Excuse me, is there anybody here from Ars Electronica who could switch this off just for 1 hour because it's very short? I pass the microphone to Steve.
Thank you. My involvement's been as a gallerist, a commercial gallery for the last 5 years or more, and a gallery called Carol Fletcher based in London. And we represent a number of artists who I think would be fall under the rubric of whether you want to call it media art or computer art or new media art or so we represent people like Manfred Moore, Evan Roth, Constant Dullar, Avram Franco Matez, Uber Morgan, Thomson and Craighead. And in that time, I think I've developed some expertise in what it takes to sell this work, whether it's selling it to private collectors or to public institutions, but clearly not quite as much as Anita, who's been doing it for 35 years. Then recently we decided to split the business into two parts, which was a commercial gallery or a commercial operation and a not-for-profit. And the not-for-profit is called the Artist Development Agency, which is what I currently run, and we launched it yesterday. And there is a space, we do have a little booth in Gallery Spaces, and that's really focused on providing sustained practical and intellectual support to artists who are sort of emerging in their careers the first 5 to 7 years after they leave formal education. And all of the artists are on a 3-year contract. But again, we're very interested in new technologies, and the artists that are on display here, they're working with AI and quantum physics, for example. And part of that is the challenge of how do we create sustainable, collectible objects. Not collectible just for the financial market, but collectible so that their place in art history can be secured. And I think it's important just to think in terms of not just it's not just about selling the object, it's about turning it into something that can be experienced in 100 years' time, not just today. And I think and that's a big topic of conversation. So I'll pass the microphone on at that point, because I think it's easiest for me to answer people's questions rather than to give a talk about what it takes.
Yeah. My name is Cornelia Ellersdorfer, and I'm an art expert and also an art insurance expert, and I work for an art insurance company in Austria, and we offer tailor-made covers for our clients, and our clients are art collectors in Austria, and we want to help preserving art in a proper way with our special made insurance cover. And I have to tell you that in Austria I never saw in a collection, we didn't have a collection with media art so far insured. So this is would be a very new product for us to design something special for the needs for such art pieces. Thank you.
My name is Franz Woider. I'm not coming from art, but I studied industrial engineering and industrial economics, and in this way, there I got my PhD and habilitation too. At the end of this, I went to the market in the consulting business, where I got CEO and partner of two international companies, Agiplan and KPMG Consulting. In the year 1975, I became a full professor at my university and in the field of organization and ergonomics. The institute was called later on Institute for Management Science. At the end of my career, I was 10 years vice chair in the curatorship of the Museum of Modern Art, Sammlung Ludwig, and 5 years I was the head of the advisory board of the Museum of not museum, of the University of Applied Art in Vienna. 1971, with my wife, I started to collect contemporary art, and at first our collection was focused on Austrian art, but then it became international. Our focus was then in the field of redacted abstract art. Our main activities were to collect paintings and graphics on one side, and sculptures and installation on the other side. Now in my collection, I have only 3% of all my artwork is in the field of media art. Unfortunately, my wife died in the year 2011, and there I decided to bring my knowledge in the field of collecting on one side and my models in the field of organization and business on the other side. I thought I should write a book, and this book is called Collecting Contemporary Art, a holistic approach. That is this book. You have it over there too. The basis of this book is a model of the art industry. You see this model of art industry in this handout I have prepared for you. And when you look at this, please, at first it looks a bit complicated, but it shows my understanding in this field in a comprehensive and integrated approach. On the right side, you see in this chart the artists and their artworks. On the left side, on the bottom, the audience and the art buyers and collectors. These groups meet them in the field of the market. And I have distinguished 4 levels of market. The level, the direct market, that's artist sales. The next is the market of galleries and art dealers, as you know it. The art market of auction houses, and another market that are the market of private sales. Sales between we and do, or in the private field, yes? On the right side, further on, you see the art intermediates, they are very important to bring artwork to the audience. They have to educate, to inform, and to communicate in this field. On the other side, there is the the purchasing and collecting process, which the end should be a collection. Finally, we have to consider that this system is working in an special context. This context has to be to look for the cultural, social, economical, and legal aspects. That means art systems are different in Asia and in South America or in Europe. Yes, and you have to decide which activities you have to look in every region. All the different subjects and items and aspects I have described in this book, and yes, and for some chapters I have invited other specialists that they get a deeper understanding. Yes. Now, finally, some words to my experiences in the field of media art market. All my art in the field of media art, that are digital paintings and graphics, digital audit installations, work art videos on one side which tell a story, and on the other side which documents performances. And I also have three-dimensional animations. They are highly sophisticated and show sophisticated spaces, and also sound, digital sound on the other side. Yes, all this I bought from artists directly. Yeah, although all my other artworks, especially the international, I bought in galleries. As a summary, I can say, if you discuss, and if we discuss market of media art, we have to discuss it in a holistic approach, which includes a lot of components in an integrated way. I think this model could give a good support for it. Thank you.
So I'm Anita Beckers. Christa told you a little bit about what I am doing. I'm doing now nearly 25 years exhibiting media art and video art and film or whatever, by side of all the other mediums in art in the gallery. My vision is still to build up a community of collectors which has an understanding what it means to collect contemporary art, what is made with the medias of our time. Because we are a generation who are living in the globalization, and we are living with computer technology. Because I was a teacher in my former life, and in the beginning of the 70s, I have introduced the students in the school about the introduction in computer technology. And this is now 45 years ago. And in this time, we had such an incredible development worldwide. And I think this has also to be mirrored in our society. And the collectors are normally, say, prefer to buy painting, sculpture, whatever, because they can show it in her house, and they can be proud, and they can make everything what they like to do with this. And this is a very nice anecdote. A colleague from me, Jennifer Gassman, she says, to collecting video art or the moving image is nothing for Feiglinge. Was heißt das? Codes, yes. It's something for well-educated collectors. And because, Angeber, was ist das? It's not so much for show off, yes. And then I have a very good collector in Denver in the US, and he's collecting a moving image, and he has in his house a studio with Hollywood technology to show and to look his video works. And he was also asked, he's on the board and a member on the board of many museums. A colleague asked him, what are you collecting? And he says, video art. And then the answer was, you are a lazy collector. And you see, the official meaning, it's so different around the world. But I still have this vision, or I am a big fan of public-private partnership. What means this? It means that we have collectors, that we have the specialists who are working in these fields. We need the artists, and we need the government and the also official community, and bring all the knowledge together, what it means to collect works, what identify our time, or what identify us in our time. And I am working very intensely to destroy all these borders, what people have to buy something with the moving image. And I think in the last 20 years it has changed a lot. Artists are thinking to produce works today what has a format, what people can bring in her house and so on. But I think this is something what I should not talk now. We can integrate it in the discussion. And also, I think you have always make an appeal to the people who are collecting and who spend a lot of money for buying contemporary art, that they also are responsible for all the history, what described history later, what built up our time from now. And the young students in the school, in every letter, official letter you can read, the government will support the competence of media from the young generation. What means this? I think if they would integrate in the school and on other places much more art, and the young people, they had an example where they can study what is art, and then they can transfer it in her active study or the whatever. I think there is so much to do, and we are now on a good point, because people have heard what is video art, what is media art, what is it. They know it, and they know it. It's everywhere shown in the exhibitions. Now I think we are responsible to find ways to make international standards, create platforms, whatever, what Christa talked about, create platforms where you can take information from, where you can go from, and where you can interact. And we built also with my colleague Julia Sökeland 5-6 years ago, the video platform Blink Video. And this is a research tool, and this is something what people can use for information, and then on this place you find also all the festivals all over the country, and then we have prize winners there. It's an information tool, and everybody who is interested can use it and can find ways how to inform you better in the future. I think I will stop on this place.
Thank you. Anita?
Yeah, my name is Sabine Himmelsbach, and I'm the director of HEC, House of Electronic Arts in Basel in Switzerland. It's a rather young institution that was founded in 2011. And since then we have started also to build a collection. I think that what makes us really special. There are not so many dedicated institutions for media art that are also collecting. In Switzerland, we have a very comfortable situation that the Federal Office of Culture, but also the cantons and the cities are collecting Swiss art. So I was wondering how to focus to make our collection really special. And what is usually not collected, because it gets really complicated, is software and net-based artistic practice. So that's where the focus of our collection lies. And then the problem already starts when you get in touch with the artist or the gallery, which is not so often the case. So we really make our acquisitions through the artists directly, mostly because some of them do not have a gallery. And the problem starts defining what you buy. Is it a WordPress blog, for example, with audio files? Who is keeping it? Its proprietary platform, how to deal with it in the future. Because of that, and in the modest ways, we are a rather small institution with 10 people working there. We have started a discussion series called Conservation Pieces, and in October 2nd we will have the 3rd edition of it. We discuss these topics. So the first one we did last year was focusing on emulation, and it of course, we want to reach out to colleagues from the field of conservation, to other curators in the museums in Switzerland, but also in all of Europe or worldwide. And we discussed the topic of emulation, how you can, at least also in the conservation departments, start to review your materials that you have, because that's where the problem often started. That was my experience when I talked with colleagues, that they have some works in the collection that have been acquired in the 1980s but cannot be viewed. So in October, the next edition will be about digital repositories. So this is the one approach that we have to talk about these problems. And maybe I give you one example of a work of a net-based work by a Swiss artist called Beat Brogle. The piece is from 2003. It's called One Word Movie. And it basically is what the title says. You have a window where you can type in a word, and then it is connected, or it was connected, to the Google search engine and searches for example, you type in landscape and then searches for images of landscape and creates a video out of it and displays it. Because of the restrictions that Google puts on the API connections, the piece didn't run anymore. So now we had to migrate it with a new software, connecting it to Bing. But what we are doing for the future, because in 5 years we might run again into a similar problem, we create a database so that all the search terms that are searched now, everything that users are connecting to the work is stored in that database, and then maybe in 5 years' time it's a piece that is online, but the searches come from the offline source of what we have gathered so far. One more aspect that I want to mention, because we are located in Basel, and once a year during Art Basel we are invited by Liste Art Fair, which is an art fair more focused on young innovative art practice. We also have a presentation there, and that is interesting for us because then of course we try to display art and artists who are not represented by a gallery and it's quite interesting for us that we can become a place to make these artistic practices public, for collectors who might not even know about them. Maybe I leave it at that.
Thank you. I'm Eduardo Katz. I'm an artist, so my contribution here is from the other perspective. And as an example, I'm participating here at Ars Electronica in the gallery space on the other side. So I would like to start by inviting everyone to come and see the work in this other mode of presentation. And I would also like for there to be less noise if possible. So the idea of presenting in this setting, in the gallery space, was very interesting when Ars Electronica invited me to participate this year. I've been participating for over 20 years. And this is the first time that galleries are invited to present work. So this was new, this was different. This was exciting, was another take on modes of presentation, on public engagement, and a different type of opportunity. So I thought it was very interesting. And you will see that the work I'm presenting here is my most recent piece. I worked on this piece for 10 years with the French Space Agency. My goal was to create, to produce, to physically make an artwork outside of the planet Earth. So I worked with the French astronaut Thomas Pesquet aboard the International Space Station. And what you see here in the space is a 12-minute video. It's an edition of 5. I'm happy to say that one has already been acquired by a private collector. It's very nice. And then on the other wall, you see photographs and embroideries that I have made in the course of producing this work. In the course of 10 years, I produced drawings, photographs, and a whole series of different works, initially for the internal dossier of the French Space Agency. As you might imagine, to work in outer space is quite complex, involves the Russians, involves NASA, involves the European Space Agency, it's very complex. So throughout the years, I have made drawings, photographs, a whole series of works, and I'm beginning to show these now. So that's one aspect of my engagement here. You will also see at the very end in this space here on the opposite corner, photographs of the flowers that I made in 2009. I received the Golden Ica Award from Ars Electronica in 2009 for that work. And in just a few words, my objective, what I did, was to move DNA from my red veins to the red veins of the flower. So this flower produces a human protein in its red veins, which flowers do not do in nature. So as a result, I call it a plantimol. It is a flower with an animal characteristic. So that's at the other end. So I'm participating primarily in the gallery space this year, and the only public talk that I'm giving is here now. So it's a very interesting mode of engagement. That's one aspect of what I'd like to share. Another is that I am very sympathetic to what has been said so far, because as an artist, I have dealt with the same issues that galleries have dealt with, museums have dealt with, other institutions have dealt with, and certainly collectors have dealt with, which is, if the work has no mode of sustainability, then it simply cannot be seen. And it can't be exhibited by museums, it can't be collected, nothing can happen with it. So I made my first digital work in 1982. My first online work in 1985. So as you might imagine, it's been very challenging to present these works from 82, 85, and so on and so forth. So about 10, 15 years ago, I noticed this and I said, well, the historical window to acquire the hardware and the software to preserve this is closing very quickly. Even film labs were closing. So it started to become more challenging. So I started this initiative, this personal private initiative, to seek to bring back my early works. It's been challenging. I won't lie to you, it has been very challenging. But with perseverance and commitment, you can do it. You can do it. It took me a lot longer, for example, to recover and restore my Minitel artworks from the 80s. Out of curiosity, raise your hand if you know what that means, Minitel. We have about, not even 30% of the room. So, Minitel. The Minitel was a precursor to the internet. Different countries developed this medium, but it was really in France that it became very popular. Basically, it meant that the Minitel was not a computer, it was a terminal that you would use to gain access to a remote server. And by saying that it was a terminal and not a computer, that means that there was no processing of information. You requested the information from a server and you watched it. That was it. Well, the Minitel network does not exist anymore. So you cannot run the Minitel terminal directly by itself. There's nothing to request information from, right? So I had to adopt a different model. I had to run the information internally inside the Minitel unit. Just to find the vintage Minitel units took years. And because I wanted to make an edition, I made 4 pieces in 1985. I wanted to make an edition of 3, so I had to find 12 identical terminals from the 80s. It was not easy. But I persevered, and eventually I found a vendor in a small town in Angoulême in France that had it, and I acquired it, and I was able to do the work. It took a lot longer than I thought to take care of the software side, but I eventually found the right engineer, because you need to find an engineer that has the right mindset, somebody that is interested in the craft of engineering, not just the industrial side of it. So I eventually found the engineer, and I was able to complete the work. And it was shown for the first time in January 2016 at the Whitechapel as part of the Electronic Superhighway exhibition. And one of the pieces was acquired by the Thomas Foundation in Chicago. And they requested information like no museum or institution has ever requested. They wanted to know absolutely everything, every wire, everything possible, the screen, everything about the piece. So I made like a 10-page file describing everything. And they were happy with that arrangement, and now that's being exhibited in their facility in Chicago. They also have a space in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I have other experiences of this kind to share, but I think we'll save that for the conversation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for sharing their input. As you know, we already sent you some questions beforehand, so I would like to go through a few of those questions, and if you please raise your hand if you want to answer this specific question. So one would be actually to the collector in our group. What kind of advice would you give to a young media artist if this person really also, you know, kind of thinks about living from his artwork? Is there any advice we can give to this person? Would you tell them format your work specifically, like Eduardo has been showing, you know, format your work so it can be more collectible? Or is there any advice we could give? Because we have here students from the Art University here, and of course that's a topic that people are interested in. If you could just give us a quick insight from your experience.
Yes, of course, it depends what sort of media art you are producing. But my suggestion is try to get your work in a good collection. Yeah, find a collector which promotes you. Yeah, and the promotion of a collector can be very important. And therefore, I think it's very important to come to a good collection, and that this collection gives you a public surrounding. And on the other side, I think you should try to, as a young artist, to go to show your artwork in open spaces, and especially in young galleries, and that gives you the best opportunity to get a good position.
I think there are different ways what we have to think about. Normally in the art field, is not so much money for young people or for artists or for galleries or for curators in general if they give her knowledge to on certain places. And I think also the universities should think about a possibility how they can integrate the industry who is in general has a very important creative field. And these industries, they need that creativity goes to all to her employers. And perhaps I have made it in the past. I was invited from marketing agencies or whatever to give all these young interns a talk about art. And the experience is very interesting. All these people are coming back to the gallery. They are doing the whole day concepts for good advertising, for marketing or whatever. And I think all the young students, they can try, if they have a certain level and they have a lot of experience and they are good, they have to be judged. And then they should starting with the university should starting information days for people from the creative industry, and all these students should go and should introduce all these young people who are working there, giving an example of creativity. And I am sure if these young people who have no clue or no connection to the art world, it brings much more creativity in her head. And I think there are so many fields where you can working on, and the art market is so overheated right now. People are looking only for the results on auction markets, and they forgot that art can only exist in the future if we supporting the young artists, because the market is empty on one day, and if we don't if it's not growing up a new generation of artists, we will stay without anything in the future. And I think you cannot discuss this in such a plenum right now, but I think there are many points where was not the people are not thinking about this. There's many points, and then young artists can earn money for this. They have to work outside from her artistic point to make her living, and there are different points where they can start from.
This isn't meant to be flippant, but get another job. Don't believe you can make money from your art. Make your art because you want to make art, not because you want to make a living from your art. And have something else that puts bread on the table. Because if you don't, you're highly likely to get into a circle where you compromise in your art for the sake of making money. And then the art loses authenticity and it's not worth it. So I think you just have to be realistic that very few people make money from art. So find yourself a job.
A question from some suggestion from the point of a collector. You have to distinguish which goals a collector is looking for. On one side, we have idealistic objectives. We have, as we heard, monetary aspects, and we have social and cultural objects too. At the beginning of my collection, I had only idealistic ideas and objectives. I was looking for discovering new things. I was spotting the spirit of time. And this media art gives a very good opportunity to bring really new things, yes? And therefore, especially for young collectors, is a really good opportunity to collect also media art.
I agree with Steve, but I wanted to bring the discussion back to what I think for collectors and for institutions is important, the issue of preservation. And because we have some students here, I wanted to point out a very interesting article or essay by the Mexican-Canadian artist Rafael Lozano Hammer, who's written a very good article on preservation from the artist's perspective. And I think it's really important to have a strategy, kind of how you document, how you address the issue of maintenance, for example, so that he, of course, I know it's not comparable for everybody because he has a very huge studio, but to think ahead, can I make a contract with the collector that he has to pay the artist when something goes wrong and needs to be fixed? All this needs to be addressed, I think, early on in contracts, and yeah, that would be an advice from my side.
Yeah, yesterday we already talked about the issue of, you know, what happens to an artwork when it breaks down. Oh, hello, we have Galerie Jalot, Valérie Hasson-Benelouche now with us. She is the representative of Eduardo Katz and also ourselves. And there's a stand over there. Valérie, if you want to introduce yourself briefly. I know it's, okay.
Hi, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Valérie Hasson-Benelouche and I have a gallery in Paris called Galerie Charlot, and we defend digital art since now 7 years, and we just opened a gallery in Tel Aviv in Israel, also focus in new media. So I have the chance to represent the work of Eduardo Katz and Christa Sommerer and Laurent Mignonneau and many of other ones. So. That's about what I do, I can say. So I'm sure you've been around talking about digital art, and I'm sure Sabine that is doing a very incredible work about that, and restorations and saving and everything. So maybe we can go further. Thank you.
Back to what we said yesterday, we already talked about the responsibilities on the side of the galleries, but also on the side of the collectors, the side of the artists. And one of the topics that really also interests me, we see now, we have Mariano Sardon here, we have Jill Scott here, so we have many media art pioneers actually in this room, which is quite exciting. And what I observed is that many of us, kind of older generation artists, are now formatting their works to be more collectible, actually. It's not anymore these works that are totally only interactive, but for example, in our case, we have this idea of portrait on the fly, but then we make prints of people's portraits, and really, or like Eduardo is doing, formatting the work so it can be actually more physical, and it becomes like, I think yesterday we talked about this secondary material that Hatanaka-san from ICC talked about. It's a kind of secondary step of the work. It comes out of the, say, interactive media work, but it formats also into a new form in forms of prints or maybe stitching or etching or all sorts of other formats. So there is a strong willingness, I think, on the side of the artists to make works more permanent without compromising the concepts. And on the other hand, we see galleries also trying to implement new formats, new distribution systems. So I feel there's a lot of momentum. And I wonder, like Anita, what you said, bringing this all together in a more orchestrated form, if that wouldn't be sort of more suitable instead of, like you said, everyone struggling for himself, but feel a more, without being, of course, too didactical or too sort of top-down. I think it has to grow bottom-up. So maybe if you want to say about your orchestrated effort idea?
I cannot repeat it all the time. I think I have said it. To collect art, technology-based art, it's not an easy thing. You need really well-educated collector with an interest about what is going on in our time. This is an issue, and I think maximum 5% of the 100% of collectors are interested in. The question is how you can step in this art market. My personal philosophy is the art market will be slowly empty with good works, and not each artist can produce like a machine. And if the auction houses have not enough material to make sales, and then you see also how the influence is on the artist, because the artists, they are thinking, what can I do to get on this place where Damien Hirst or the whatever is now? And this is a good time for a reactivation. And I believe that we have the chance now that video art or the all time-based media is the next hype on the market. I think so. There is not enough other artworks anymore. And I think it can be. The question is only how intelligent are all the artists are working in this field, the galleries and the collectors come together, talk together. It's not only about making a lot of money, it's only about what can we do that artists who are working with time-based media have the same chance to earn her living with her work. Because this is not a question anymore for artists who are now very famous. But we have to work on the situation, how we bring together these artists on the same level as the normal artists are working.
One short remark to this. I think we also, as institutions, and then of course in a concentrated effort, not just one tiny institution, but in, you know, as a group, have to address the industry, you know, to get them on board. And for example, there has been a first reach out to Google, you know, to make them understand that their platform is used by artists for their projects, and maybe, you know, to not restrict more, you know, these connections that artists need to use. So hopefully there comes something of that.
To further echo some of these issues in relation to what I mentioned before, I don't think necessarily that the only mode of engagement that artists that work with media, when they produce work in other media, is to think of it as secondary. It is not my case, for example. So what I'm presenting here, the photographs that I'm presenting together with my video made in space, those photographs are not secondary. In fact, they precede the realization of the work by 3 years. They were made before. They were part of the process of getting there. So if anything, they would be primary, not secondary. I produced them originally for the internal dossier of the French Space Agency, because it was necessary to visualize, to begin to give visual expression to this desire to work outside of the Earth. Could somebody please bring down the noise down there? Thank you so much. We would all appreciate it. Thank you. So in that sense, it was important. It was necessary to do that. So those photos are from 2014, and the work was realized in 2017. And the drawings that are not shown here were created in 2015, 2 years before the realization of the work. But they were created, of course, deliberately as a form of visual expression. So I think there are other ways to think about this, not necessarily as secondary, but perhaps as primary. That's one idea. The other idea is that artists can anticipate these issues and prevent them from happening up to a point in regards to media preservation. So in regards to my Minitel, after spending about 10 years in the process of restoring them, I decided myself to acquire all of the hardware that I employed in the preservation. So if an institution that purchased the work or a collector that purchased the work comes back in 5 years, 10 years and says, well, you know, this is not working anymore, I have in stock the materials that I used for that restoration. And you might think, well, you know, this might not be necessary because it's 2017, I can just buy it when I want. Well, it would be prudent to stock that material because now it's accessible, it's cheaper, it's available. These companies go out of business, they change their model. So you could at least buy 10 years, 15 years by acquiring a few extra copies of the material yourself. And I've heard that some museums are doing that. Some museums, I heard, are beginning to ask artists to provide five, if not the artist providing, that they are themselves acquiring 5 copies of the hardware that was used, so they buy a lot of time in terms of preservation. So yes, we are in need of models. We need to think ahead. We need to prevent the problem from happening, at least for a while, to buy time, rather than just try to rush and deal with problems that emerge out of lack of planning.
We have a maximum of 5 minutes left, because then we have to go to another panel. And I would like to give the opportunity to the public to maybe pose 3 questions. So if there's anybody here who has an urgent question to all this collective knowledge that is here, please do so or come up. Jill, how about you? I see you are. So please come up, Jill. This is Jill Scott, a famous media artist, and I'm very happy, Jill, that you came here, old friends. And I would actually like to also ask you, Jill, for your own, take, because I think we had this discussion before, how you preserve your works and how you deal with the art market, or is it interesting to you at all?
It's a question that's been haunting me for years. And I think the problem is that it's very, very hard to, I've had things that are still in basements that were bought by museums years ago. And the question is, if they're not prepared to put the money in to upgrade those things, then I think we have a big problem. So I'm not too sure about keeping the old technology. I'm more interested in how the artist, I think, would find it very challenging to upgrade their technology and to still keep the same content, which I think is very interesting. So it gives the artist another challenge, which I think is worthwhile, one. And the other thing that I think is very, very important is, which I'd like to address all of you about, is opening up the audience of collectors to include the scientists, the computer scientists, the natural scientists, the life scientists, who actually don't know very much about art, and would be very, very interested in being engaged much more than they are. So the question is, how do we open up new audiences so that this kinds of work extends beyond the art market?
Well, then I take the question. I think it's our chance as an institution in Switzerland, where you have Art Basel once a year with several satellite art fairs around it. And I always try, as I said, because we are present with a booth at Lister ourselves, to present works that cannot be found in other galleries, but are, challenging the notion of what they know so far about art. So I think that's what we're trying to do. And of course, I have worked in many places. I've also directed a space in Oldenburg in north of Germany, but now in Basel, it's such a hub where, a lot of collectors are coming through, and we try our best to make media art visible.
So if there's no question from the audience, or is there any last minute questions? I know you probably have to head off to the next event. Then I would like to close here. Or there is somebody? You saw somebody? Okay, not. Then we close here. I think what we see from the attendance here, there is an interest in this topic, and we would like to push this further maybe at next year's Ars Electronica. And also we are planning right now, as I mentioned, in collaboration between Ars Electronica and University Art of Design, Interface Cultures program, a new initiative that deals with this topic. Of course, we are completely aware that we can't solve all these problems because they are massive, but at least place this topic and start a discussion around it. So you will hear from us very soon, and I would like to thank to all the speakers here for taking the time to come to Ars Electronica, bring this topic to this event here. I think it's very important that we are all here, and please do go and see the exhibition spaces of Galerie Jalot, Galerie Betgas, also Steve Fletcher artists are here, and please come and join all the coming events. So thanks very much for your attendance. Wir haben da leider nicht genug Zeit, dass wir alles ausdiskutieren, aber da bräuchten wir